So, firstly, why do we need waste services? Well, waste and recycling, it's an essential service. It's something that we kind of take for granted. We put it in the bin, we put the bin out to the curbside, and the truck comes along, empties it, and it kind of magically disappears. So we often take it for granted. These images here are just highlight some of the reasons why waste services are important. So the ones on the outside are for when the garbage truck drivers went on strike in Naples in Italy and also in Greece. And obviously no one was picking up the rubbish. So what do people do with it? They didn't want it in their homes, so they put it out on the street. And as you can imagine, not a very pleasant place to live. Also not very hygienic, definitely not good for the environment. The one in the middle is actually from Indonesia, and that's in a place where they don't have any waste services. And so people just put all their waste in the environment, which that boy there, he's on a boat. He's actually floating on a river. So one of the most polluted rivers in the world because they have no waste services there. So it all just goes into the environment and accumulates. So what have we got here in Mount Gambier? Well, in Mount Gambier, we have the three services, so your general waste or landfill or rubbish, recycling, and your organics, which we're calling FOGO, which I'll touch on a little bit later. The top ones there are kind of the newer bins with the coloured lids, and the bottom ones are the older bins. And we're obviously changing to the new ones with the coloured lids because it makes it a lot easier for messaging for waste and recycling, as opposed to those old ones that kind of look similar. So first we have the rubbish landfill, the general waste bin. So all of the contents of these bins goes to Caroline landfill. So that's out east of Mount Gambier. And these resources are buried forever. So basically, they go in the bin, they get taken to the landfill, and then they just get buried. They just stay there. So they're never going to get reused, never get recycled, and they just build up to a little mini mountain of waste, and that just keeps growing and growing. The more we put in the rubbish bin, the more that goes out there. We've done audits of your average Mount Gambier rubbish bins over the years that involved kind of getting 100 random rubbish bins and sorting them out by hand with tongs. You can sort of see some images on the side of the screen there, sorting them out into all different categories and weighing them and recording them. And that gave us this very good data that you see on the infographic here of the bin. So 36% of the average Mount Gambier rubbish bin is food waste. So some of that's genuine, onion peels and things. But a lot of it is just wasted food. So we find whole bags of bread, whole chickens, whole bags of veggies, all sorts of things that just didn't get eaten. People threw it in the bin. Another 9% is garden waste, so things like lawn clippings, leaves, that kind of thing. 25% is recyclables, so plastic bottles, cardboard boxes, all that kind of thing. And so that only leaves 30% that is genuine general waste that should be going to the landfill. So it's a massive 70% that could be either recycled or composted. So some common mistakes for the general waste bin is obviously putting in recyclables. Obviously, it should go in the recycling bin instead of putting in general waste. Putting in food scraps, and we'll cover shortly what you do with food scraps instead of putting them in the general waste bin. Putting in garden waste, batteries or other items that just shouldn't go in the general waste bin like e-waste. This is an image of Caroline landfill. So when they build a landfill, they build it in sections called cells. This is one of the cells. And basically all the colored material you can see on that photo is all plastics. So, we've got a lot of plastic and other kind of recyclables. And, you obviously can't see the food waste in there, but there's a lot of food waste in there too. And if you could smell that, you would smell the food waste, which is rots in a landfill, creates methane and causes that horrible smell that you get at landfills. And so there's a lot of material going there that shouldn't be going there. This is a side-on view of one of the cells. So this little mountain of rubbish took only 2 years to fill up. So that's an image of myself down there at the bottom. I'm 6'4", so it sort of gives you a bit of a scale of how big that is. And that only took 2 years to fill up. So if you take that infographic from before with the data from the bin audit and you project that onto the side of the landfill, you've got your general waste in red. That's really just how big it should be after 2 years. So really a cell like that should take probably 6 years to fill up rather than 2. But because we're putting all this material into the general waste bins that doesn't need to be in there, it's filling it up much quicker, which also costs the community money. So to build a new cell of a landfill is very expensive, in the vicinity of around $1 million just to get it started, build that bottom layer so it doesn't pollute the environment. And so obviously the less waste we send to landfill, the more the community saves money. So that should really be a third of its size. So how does it all get there? Well, mostly it's one item at a time. So 60% of the waste that goes to the landfill is from households. So it seems like it's just an apple core, it's just a cardboard box, just a plastic bottle, doesn't really matter. If it was that, then it wouldn't matter. But when you add that up over all the different items, all the people, every day, every year, then it does add up to a mountain of rubbish. So that's just one thing that we can do to help, reduce that mountain of waste, do the right thing for the community, do the right thing for the environment, just taking that extra moment just to put it in the right bin. So, you put the cardboard box in the recycling bin rather than just throwing it straight into the general waste. Now onto the recycling bins. So the contents of these bins goes to green triangle recyclers. So it's the same place that you take your 10-cent containers to get cashed in. Recycling is about taking the items and then getting back to their base material. So whatever it is, be it cardboard, glass, particular kinds of plastic, etc., particular kinds of metal. And so different materials go to different places. So you can see on the screen, you've got your bin, gets picked up by the truck, gets taken to green triangle recyclers, and then they sort it all out with machines and by hand into those different materials. So sorted out into the cardboard, into the glass, into the metal, into the various kinds of plastic. When we've done audits of the rubbish bins, the results have been better than the general waste, but still too much contamination. So 16% probably doesn't sound like much, but really, ideally, you want that to get to kind of less than 5%. And that's probably 16% is probably a bit higher than the average around Australia. So, we've got a bit more work to do in regards to recycling. So some common mistakes with recycling, putting in dirty recyclables, so that's kind of food caked on it. You don't have to wash your recyclables, just rinse them, but they shouldn't have food caked on them. So part of that is, obviously they're easier to recycle, but also it's a courtesy to the people who work in the recycling centre. So you imagine, if you've ever smelt a, milk bottle that hasn't been rinsed and has been sitting in somewhere for a few days, particularly in hot weather, it really stinks, doesn't it? So you imagine you're working in a place where thousands of these pongy milk bottles are going through. It's not very pleasant. So it's also about showing respect for the people who work in the recycling industry. Other mistakes, putting items in plastic bags. So everything should be loose in the recycling bin. Don't put it in plastic bags, because what will happen is the workers at the recycling centre will see a plastic bag and they'll just assume that it's rubbish and they'll just throw it into the rubbish chute. Another mistake is putting lids on bottles. So I'll talk about lids in a moment, but take the lids off the bottle. Another mistake is putting something in that's got two materials in it. So by that I mean, so you can see that kind of pump head from a shampoo bottle or whatever. It's got plastic. It's also got a spring inside. So it's plastic and metal. They don't have time at the recycling centre to take those things apart, plastic in one bit chute and the metal in the other. So that would all just go into the landfill chute. So do you have to remove bottle lids? Well, yes. Short answer is yes. Often they're made of a different plastic to the bottle, not always, but particularly with something like a soft drink bottle, the lid is actually a different kind of plastic to the bottle. And so when you're recycling, particularly plastic, you need just the one kind of plastic. You can't mix them because they have different melting points and things like that. So you just want, say it's number 1 plastic, you only want number 1 plastic, or if it's number 2, you just want number 2. Also, when you've got bottles with lids, sometimes when they're put into a bale at the recycling centre, the lid will then pop off and then the bale falls apart, plastic goes everywhere, and then they have to, basically sort it all out again. So it's double handling, costs more money, and makes recycling less viable. So when you remove the lids, it makes recycling more viable and more gets recycled. So you can, I'll show you what you can do in a moment, but one thing you can also do is number 2 plastics are the same as what the plastic milk bottles are made out of. So if you could take a plastic milk bottle, put all your number 2 lids in there, and then put the lid back on and put that in a recycling bin, then that can be recycled. Another option you can do those, you may have seen these little kind of colourful bins at the Civic Centre in the foyer or at Coles and Woolworths. And so as the labels on them suggest, you can put in plastic bottle lids, number 2 and number 4. So when you look at a lid, not always, but there'll often be a little number in there next to the triangle or in the triangle. You can also put in plastic bread tags and oral care products. So that's toothpaste tubes, toothbrushes, etc. So the plastic lids, they go to Tennyson Woods College. They have a recycling program there that they do with the students. They sort them all out into the particular kinds of plastic that they are, the varieties, and they shred them down and they melt them and they turn them into new products. So you can see just in the image here, there's a tabletop, but they create all sorts of things out of those plastic lids. So that's where those go. And Rotary, Lakes Rotary very kindly take all those lids. They go around to Coles and Woolworths and the Civic Centre, and they take those lids from those bins to Tennyson Woods College. Another local recycling business is Ecoplast. So that's with Willie Van Niekerk. So he takes plastics, like the number 2 plastics that milk bottles are made out of, and he turns them into new products right here in Mount Gambier. So he turns them into park benches, a lot of kind of fencing material, fencing posts, and things like that, droppers, etc. So he's doing that right here in Mount Gambier, which is fantastic. The bread tags, they go to St. Martin's College, where the students sort them out into the different colours. Then they go to Transmutation in Robe. So Brad Scott has the business Transmutation in Robe, and he melts them down and turns them into bread bowls, which he sells through country roads and the like, and into other products too. So they're all getting recycled on the Limestone Coast as well. Takeaway cups. So there is a bit of confusion, and when you look at advice on general websites, which is mostly from the cities, they probably say you can't. But in Mount Gambier, you can recycle the takeaway cups. So the cup part can either go in your recycling, as this image on the screen says. If it has the word compostable on it, then it can go into the organics bin, the FOGO bin. And with the lid, generally, if it's got the number 6 on it, that means it's a kind of polystyrene, so that will go in the general waste bin. But if the lid has the word compostable on it, then it can go in the organics bin. Pizza boxes. Well, if they're clean, like the one you see there, the clean one, that can go in the recycling bin. If they've got food caked on it, then it can go in the organics bin, because it's just a cardboard box. It was not that long ago, it was a tree. It can go into the green organics bin. It doesn't matter that it's got some food caked on it. So where does all the recycling go? So as we mentioned, when you put something out the curbs in your curbside recycling bin, trucks come, they take it to Green Triangle Recyclers, which they sort it out using machines and by hand. They sort it out into cardboard, glass, metals, etc. And then they bale it up like that image there, that big cube. That's a big bale of aluminium cans, thousands of cans in there, and then it gets sent off to another facility to be kind of melted down or shredded down and turned into a new product made out of that material. So some examples are number 2 plastics like milk bottles. They go to a place that turns them into pipes. So they will get baled up, sent off, and this other company turns them into pipes. Newspapers, they go to Adelaide and they get turned into kitty litter. So this kind of paper-based kitty litter. So why should we recycle? Well, recycling uses a lot less energy and material than using raw materials, basically. So you've got some stats on the screen there. 10% of the energy as compared to creating new plastic. Recycling a ton of paper saves 17 trees. Recycling glass saves 30% of the energy as opposed to making new glass. And obviously, if you reuse, say, a glass jar or something, then it uses no energy. Now the organics bin. So previously called the green waste bin, organics bin, we're now calling it the FOGO bin. So FOGO stands for Food Organics, Garden Organics, and that's really to emphasize that to people that you can put food in there. So as we saw from that previous infographic about the general waste bin, 36% of what's in there is food waste going to the landfill, where it causes, obviously uses up a lot of space, but also creates methane, that stinky gas, which is also a dangerous gas and a greenhouse gas, creates leachate, which is polluted water, and it's wasted materials, because if you put it in the organics bin or FOGO bin instead, it gets turned into compost and then gets reused. So that's why we're calling it the FOGO bin, Food Organics, Garden Organics. So organics includes basically anything that was recently alive. So you can put any kind of plant material in there. You can even put bones, shells, meat, dairy, bread, all that kind of food can go in there. It's now a free service for anyone who wants it. So if you've got an organics bin, you can just start using it, putting out the curbside, just like you do your general waste and your recycling. It goes to BioGrow out at Wandillo, where they compost these and turn them into compost products, potting mix and things like that. So what's the big deal about food waste? Well, as I said, 36% is food waste. So that's the biggest component of what's in the general waste bins. So that's over 2,100 tons of food waste going to the landfill every year, just from households. How much of this could have been prevented? How much could have been composted instead? When we look at the audit results for the FOGO bin, the results are very good. So anyone who's got a FOGO bin, thank you very much for using it properly and keep up the good work. So you want to keep that contamination rate very low, because the lower your contamination rate, the more viable the recycling system is. Mistakes that we do get in the FOGO bin is people say put their food waste in plastic bags instead of compostable bags. So with the FOGO bin, you only want to use something that's certified compostable, not biodegradable, not degradable, definitely not plastic, but just compostable. If you have a FOGO bin, you may have one of these, a kitchen caddy. If you don't have one, then you can come into the Civic Centre to the Council Customer Service Desk and get a kitchen caddy. You can also get a roll of compostable bags as well. You get one per year, so you can come into the customer service desk and get a roll of compostable bags for free, one per year. So basically the kitchen caddy is a little bin that you keep in the kitchen, line it with a compostable bag, but you could use newspaper if you wanted, or you could even just use a bucket. Don't have to line it with anything if you don't want to. Put your food scraps in there, all kind of food scraps as I mentioned. Then you put it into your FOGO bin. It is important to only use compostable bags. If you're going to use bags, they have to be certified, and I'll show you the certification symbol in a moment. Yeah, so all FOGO bin subscribers can get a caddy and a roll of bags. So you might have heard these terms, degradable, biodegradable, compostable. There's a bit of confusion around about what they mean. Basically, degradable just means it's plastic, but it breaks down into small bits of plastic, which is not a good thing. That just means that the small bits of plastic spread even further through the environment and get into all sorts of places. So degradable is not a good thing. Biodegradable, there's no kind of rules around how that's used. So sometimes that is a plant-based material, but sometimes it's not. And they can also just break down into small bits of plastic and spread throughout the environment. So I wouldn't trust biodegradable either. You really want to look for compostable. So certified compostable. And if it's certified, it'll have one of those two symbols on there. So that seedling symbol or the compost bin symbol, the home compostable bin symbol. So if it's got those on there, then it's definitely compostable. It does have the compost bin symbol on it. That means you can compost it at home in your ordinary compost bin. If it doesn't have that, then it just goes into the FOGO bin, where it will go to BioGrow, and they have a big commercial operation where they everything just turns back into soil. So this is BioGrow. They have their site out at Wandillo where they do all their composting. They take not just the FOGO from Mount Gambier and other towns, they also take a lot of forestry waste and other kind of organic waste. And they put it in these huge windrows, they shred it up, they keep it at the right moisture level, and it all just turns back into soil very quickly. So they can, it's a big operation, and that's why all the bones and shells and everything all disappear too, because they grind it all up, keep it at the right temperature, turn it regularly, and it all just breaks back down into soil. But if you don't have a FOGO bin and you don't need one or you don't want one, you can do home compost as well. So, it can be as easy or complicated as you like. You could do something like hot compost. You get better results, but it's more tricky. You can do cold compost, which is basically have a compost bin, pile, whatever, you just throw it in, leave it for 12 months and it will break down. You can even just dig a hole in your garden and bury your food waste if you wanted. That some people do that too. Or worm farms, that's a good option for food waste. If you are interested in home compost, then Council does partner with an organisation called Compost Revolution. So you can go to the website, which I'll put on screen in the next slide, and you can get half-price composting equipment. So all the things on your screen here, tumblers, bins, worm farms, this green thing is called a green cone. So you're going to bury the basket bit into in the soil in your garden, and then you throw all your food waste in, and it kind of uses the heat from the sun. It's got two cones in there to kind of take out all the moisture from the food waste. And that basket, you don't get the scale looking at it on the screen here, but it's fairly large, and it takes, they say, 2 years to fill up. And then you kind of dig it up and start the process again. But that's a good option too. So if you're interested in that, you go to compostrevolution.com.au/Mount Gambier, and then you choose what you want, get the discount, use a credit card to pay for it, and then it gets sent directly to your home. So very convenient. You could go do it after this webinar and order your compost gear, and it will arrive at your home within kind of 2 or 3 weeks. So on food waste, there's obviously households. There's a lot of the component of food waste that's going to landfill. There's also food businesses. So we're doing a trial at the moment where we're giving food businesses an opportunity to divert their food waste away from landfill. So we give them some bins to put into their kitchen so they can separate their waste. And then they get one of these small skips, that's 660 litre skip, and they put all their food waste in there, and that gets collected once a week. And so far, we've diverted over 80 tonnes of food waste from food businesses away from landfill, which is fantastic. And that's probably going to run till early 2023. So if you know a food business that might be interested, you know someone who has a food business, then tell them to get in touch with me and they can take part of this trial. It's free. It's a free trial. And then from that, we're going to kind of use the trial to work out what form that will take in the future. So there are things that can be recycled, but not through your curbside recycling bin. You've got to take them somewhere else to get recycled. So here are a few examples: domestic batteries, AA, AAA, that kind of thing. We don't want you putting them in the general waste because they'll go to landfill and then the chemicals will leach out and potentially cause problems. So it's best not to do that. You can put them into the recycling bins at Aldi or Bunnings. There's also a bin at the Mount Gambier Library near the self-checkout station where they then get sent off and properly recycled. The library also takes mobile phones, plus a lot of places that sell phones also take mobile phones through the mobile muster program, so they get sent off and get recycled. Light globes and fluoro tubes can go to Bannermitre 10, also the waste transfer station. Now, anyone who's been watching the news, paying attention to recycling today would have probably seen that REDCycle have paused their services. So REDCycle are a program that recycles soft plastics. So that's plastic bags, and like the things you see on the screen there, chip packets, muesli bar wrappers, etc. Basically any kind of soft plastics. And so how that system worked is you would, say you have a plastic bag in your kitchen somewhere, throw all your soft plastics into it. Then when you go to Coles or Woolworths, you would just put it into a special dedicated bin. Then it gets sent off and turned into timber alternatives, so park benches and things like that. Well, they've kind of been a victim of their own success. So they've got so much material and they've had one or two of the companies who used to take it have stopped. So REDCycle have said they're temporarily pausing that program. So I guess you can't take it to the supermarkets now at the moment. But there's been a bit of misreporting about it because they've kind of reported as if, everyone's been deceived. We thought we're putting our soft plastics into these bins and it's not getting recycled. But if you paid attention, you would see that the soft plastics have not gone to landfill. So they haven't been sending any of this to the landfill. What they have done is when these other companies stopped taking it, they've still, I think, got, one or two companies who are still taking it. I think they had 3 or 4, so one of the 2 others have stopped. And so they ended up with more material than they could offload. But they haven't sent it to landfill. What they have done is put it in a warehouse. So they've kind of stockpiled it, I guess, at their own expense, significant expense. But I guess the take home for that is it hasn't gone to landfill. It's still there. And stockpiling it so that they're stockpiling it so they can recycle it later on. So it's still going to get recycled. So no one's been deceived. It's going to get recycled and hopefully they'll kickstart again soon. I guess my take on it is that, they've still got these 1 or 2 companies who are taking it. And I guess they need to pause it so that those 1 or 2 companies can now, make their way through that big backlog that's in the warehouse and then recycle all that. Once they've got through that, hopefully by the time they get through that stockpile, they'll have another 1 or 2 companies on board and they can kickstart the collection again. But at the moment, unfortunately, they've paused it as of today. So we'll have to just kind of watch this space and see what happens. I guess it does highlight that companies really need to, have some ownership of what happens to their products after consumers, post-consumers. So for example, a good example where that does happen is with TVs and computers. So when you buy a new TV or computer, a tiny bit of the price goes into paying for getting that recycled at the end of its life. So that's why you can take TVs and computers and computer products to the waste transfer station in Mount Gambier for free, because there's this national scheme where it's financially supported through the purchase of new TVs and computers through that tiny bit of the price, which goes to this recycling program. So you can take it there for free and it gets recycled. Really, all products should have some form of that, and companies who make these products need to take ownership of what happens to their material after the consumers used it. So these are the bins that were accepting it, and hopefully they'll reappear soon. So one, this kind of square rectangle ones, Woolworths, round ones, Coles. Hopefully you'll see them again soon when it restarts. But this is what they were turning them into. So this is a bus stop in James Street, obviously. So that grey material looks like timber. That's actually all, that used to be soft plastics. So they've shredded it up, melted it down, and now it's those timber alternatives in the bus stop, which are very durable. Polystyrene, so that's, you know, like those white polystyrene boxes you see on screen. You can take them to the transfer station for free where they get recycled. So we've got this machine here, that little light brown machine you see there. It doesn't look very glamorous, but what it does do is it shreds up the polystyrene and melts it down, takes all the air out of it. Polystyrene is 98% air. And then it kind of melts it down, and then we form it into little bricks, and we stockpile the bricks on pallets, and then we send it off, and it gets turned into picture frames, skirting boards, and things like that. So what we do ask is that you take any stickers and things off it, obviously clean polystyrene. We don't take the foam meat trays because they're slightly different to the expanded polystyrene, which those boxes and things are made out of. Another program you may have seen is called TerraCycle. So if you go to that website there, terracycle.com.au, they have all the program for all these things that you can't recycle through the curbside system, but you can through this program. So how it works is, for example, the coffee pods, you know, Nescafe in that example basically pay for them to get recycled through their corporate responsibility. So you save up a box full of coffee pods, you get a label from TerraCycle, you have to register through their program, put the label on the box, take it to the post office and send it off, and then it gets sent off and then they recycle it. So check out that website and see the options there, because you can recycle all sorts of things through TerraCycle that you can't through the curbside bins. Now the reuse market. So hopefully people know about the reuse market. If not, it's out on Eucalypt Drive. So next door to the Green Triangle Recycles, where you take 10-cent containers, also next door to the waste transfer station. Sell anything and basically anything and everything secondhand except for clothes, really. So even electronic items, they test and tag them, make sure they work. And it's located 3 Eucalypt Drive. If you do have items that are still in reasonable condition that somebody else might want and you can't be bothered selling them or whatever, take them to the waste transfer station and you can drop them off there for free. Then they'll get sold through the reuse market for cheap so that somebody else can use it and they don't end up in landfill. So I'm a bit biased, but as far as, you know, tip shops and that kind of thing go, I think it's up there for, you know, being one of the more stylish kind of facilities. The staff and the volunteers, they're doing an excellent job in presenting it, you know, attractively. They put things, you know, like as you can see in the image there, they kind of color code things. They put all the similar things together. They actually wash every item that goes in there. So every bit of cutlery or crockery or whatever all gets washed and dried and set out. At the moment, it's open 2 days a month. So if you go to the Mount Gambier website and go to sustainability reuse market, it's got all the opening days on there. And I recommend that if you're interested, get there early, because it's extremely popular, and sometimes you can't even get a park in the street, Eucalypt Drive, because there's so many people there. So it's run by council staff, but also with the help of volunteers. Our youth program also help with it. And we try and keep the prices low so that the material moves through. So the vast majority of things are very cheap, probably the only place you can go with, you know, your spare change and come out with a handful of items. So the whole idea is to reduce material going to landfill. So if you have a recycling question, the first stop is the What to Recycle Where booklet. So that's, there are hard copies at the Mount Gambier Library and the Civic Centre for you, the customer service for council, but it's also on the web too. So if you go to the Mount Gambier Council website, www.mountgambier.sa.gov.au, go to Sustainability, Waste and Recycling Educational, then this guide, What to Recycle and Where in Mount Gambier is there. So the question really is not can it be recycled, but can it be recycled in Mount Gambier? Because obviously the recycling systems are a bit different everywhere you go in Australia. So really the question is, can you recycle it here in Mount Gambier? If something's not on that list, it's fairly comprehensive, but we don't have absolutely everything on there. If something's not on there, then get in touch with council and we'll try and give you some good advice. We do have some videos on the website, on that same page of the website, that show what happens at the landfill, the recycling centre, and BioGrow. If you're interested, they only go for a couple of minutes. We do waste site tours out to Caroline Landfill, the reuse market and the transfer station. That's for school groups and community groups. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with me, because it's one thing to sort of hear about it. It's another thing to go out and see it in person and smell it. So it's a good opportunity. So in summary, recycling is a lot better than landfill. Reusing and avoiding is even better than recycling, and lots of little items add up to a lot of waste. And we can all do our bit just through that one little action of putting something in the right bin. There are lots of things you can recycle through your curbside bin, but also in other places. It does make a difference, and you can do it. So as I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded, so you can refer back to it. It'll go on YouTube sometime soon, but I will stop sharing, and then if anyone has any questions, then they can go ahead. So if you do have any questions, then you can put them in the Q&A or in the chat. But if we, if we did a comprehensive job, then thank you very much for attending this evening. Hope you learned something. If you think of any other questions later on, don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll try and help you out. But yeah, I just really encourage you to, do the right thing, have confidence in our local recycling system, and yeah. One thing I didn't mention too is with the local recycling system, it's different to the big cities. Some people have, can lose confidence in the recycling programs in the big cities, but really here in Mount Gambier, everything does get recycled because of the nature of the relationship with the local recycler. It's not really in their interest to send anything to landfill because they won't make any money out of it. So when they, their business model is basically based on selling the material to get recycled. It doesn't make any sense for them to send it to landfill because they'll lose money. So everything you put in your recycling bin, as long as it should be in there, then it will get recycled. So I've got one question here. Question regarding old shoes and clothes that aren't good enough to go to second-hand stores. What can be done to capture this form of waste? Yeah, so at the moment, unfortunately, that is an item that does have to go in general waste here in Mount Gambier. So yeah, old clothes and shoes that aren't good enough to donate to op shops, unfortunately have to go to general waste. There are movements within the textile industry to set up recycling systems. And I think there are a couple of smaller systems in the big cities in Melbourne and the like. Hopefully in the near future, they'll extend out to regional areas like Mount Gambier. But at the moment, they have to go to general waste, but hopefully we'll see more movement in that area. But actually, I think, with secondhand shoes, I think Athlete's Foot do actually take some kind of shoes. So I think they've got a bin there if you go to Athlete's Foot, if you happen to be down the street in Mount Gambier, and just have a look. I don't know if it's all kinds of shoes or just sports shoes, but go check out Athlete's Foot, and they do have a bin in there, I think, for receiving old shoes, but it could just be sports shoes, but I'll have to double check that and make sure that we've got the correct information on the What to Recycle Where list. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I hope you have a good evening. And yeah, if you have any questions, then don't hesitate to get in touch.